The invincible Kryn warfleet had terrorized worlds with sadistic glee until they made the mistake of attacking humans. Kryn claws ripped human bodies, spilling blood across the ruins of Zephyria City. Scott Murray slogged through slippery red puddles and smoking wreckage, squinting at charred husks of Eliani warships. Wren stumbled over crumbled stone, chirping mournfully at Scott. Kryn guns shattered our hope. Our people run, hide. Kryn hunt us for sport. Scott squeezed Wren's feathered shoulder. We fight back. Humans bring secret weapon. Kryn know nothing of war. Scott fished in his pocket and pulled out a tooth-carved whistle. Wren tilted his head quizzically. Humans ride to battle on backs of beasts, Scott said with a savage grin. He blew the whistle, an unearthly keen slicing through the haze. Ghostly howls rose in the mist, and thunder rumbled closer, like a cavalry of monsters galloping from Scott's nightmares. Wren's eyes widened. What comes to kill Kryn? Earth's ancient warbeasts, Scott laughed darkly. Dire wolves, saber-cats, hellhounds. Kryn will regret starting this war. Shapes moved in the fog, paws thudding and nostrils snorting. Kryn would learn the true meaning of terror now. The last time these beasts hunted, they devoured entire species. Humanity's final weapon had arrived. The galaxy's most horrific predators, loyal only to Earth, hungry for Kryn flesh. The mist parted like a curtain, revealing a sight that made Wren's blood run cold. Emerging from the fog were creatures unlike any Wren had seen before. Wolves, but not the sleek, graceful hunters that roamed Zephyria's forests. These beasts were monstrous, their bodies rippling with coiled muscles beneath mottled grey fur. Their eyes glowed with a feral intelligence, and Wren could see the glint of cybernetic implants embedded in their skulls. The pack approached, led by a massive alpha male with a pelt crisscrossed by old scars. The beast came to a halt before Scott, lowering its head in a gesture of respect. Scott reached out, scratching behind the wolf's ear with the easy familiarity of old comrades. "It's time, Chief," Scott murmured, his voice barely audible over the distant sounds of battle. "Time to show these Kryn what real war looks like." Chief's lips peeled back in a savage grin, baring fangs as long as Wren's hand. Wren watched awestruck as Scott swung himself onto the dire wolf's back with practiced ease. Chief didn't so much as grunt under the human's weight, his powerful frame more than capable of carrying his rider into battle. The rest of the pack gathered around their leader, awaiting orders. Scott turned to Wren, his eyes hard as flint. "Gather what's left of your forces," he commanded. "We'll buy you time to evacuate the civilians." Wren nodded, still reeling from the sudden turn of events. As he hurried off to rally his battered troops, he heard Scott's battle cry echoing through the ruined streets. "For Earth!" The howls of the dire wolves joined their human companions' shout, a chilling chorus that sent shivers down Wren's spine. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw the pack charging towards the heart of the Kryn forces, Scott at their head. They moved like a tide of furious shadows, ready to unleash the wrath of Earth's most terrifying creatures upon their unsuspecting foes. The dire wolves crashed into the Kryn front lines, smashing through their defenses in a churning mass of rippling muscle and flashing fangs. Kryn plasma rifles spat searing bolts at the beasts, but many shots went wide in the chaos. Warbeasts and Kryn soldiers twisted together in a writhing tangle of blood, metal and matted fur, as the wolves' claws gouged through armor to shred the flesh beneath. Scott and Chief led the charge, fighting as one. The big wolf wove between energy blasts with fluid grace, jaws snapping and paws batting aside Kryn troopers like toys. Riding low over Chief's shoulders, Scott squeezed off pinpoint shots from his rifle, downing Kryn with bullet holes perfectly placed between their optics. But the Kryn still had teeth. As the wolves ravaged their infantry, a phalanx of towering battle mechs stomped forward, humming with power. Lasers stabbed out from their arm cannons, scything through the wolf pack. Smoking holes appeared in shaggy hides, and bionic parts exploded in showers of sparks as beasts crumpled under the onslaught. "Damn!" Scott hissed. "Those tin cans will tear the wolves apart." He bent close to Chief's twitching ears. "We gotta take 'em down fast." You ready to go a-hunting, old school?" A rumbling growl vibrated through the wolf's barrel chest, his red eyes glinting. Baring his fangs in a feral grin, Scott slapped a hidden button on his gauntlet. Arcs of electricity crackled across the bodies of the fallen wolves, knitting gaping wounds and reviving shattered cyber systems. Twitching, the beasts dragged themselves to their feet, eyes blazing with unholy light. The mech pilots faltered, trying to process the nightmarish sight of wolves rising from the dead. "About time Earth's secret weapon kicked in," Scott whooped. With an eerie howl, the now immortal wolf pack surged toward the mechs. Scott raised his fist, bellowing a wordless war cry. The hunt was on. The tide turned as the immortal dire wolves crashed into the Kryn mechs, metal screaming and circuits sparking as the beast's claws shredded armor plating like paper. Wolf fangs punched through cockpits, silencing pilots' terrified screams with gory finality. Scott and Chief whirled through the chaos, an unstoppable dervish of human fury and animal ferocity. Kryn soldiers fell before the onslaught, their weapons useless, their bodies broken. Mechs toppled and exploded, belching gouts of flame. The wolves ravaged the battlefield, leaving twisted wreckage and shattered corpses in their wake. As the final mech collapsed in a shower of sparks, smoking holes punched through its hull, Scott surveyed the devastation. The dire wolves limped back to him, blood-spattered but alive, stubby tails wagging in weary triumph. A blinding flash speared from the sky. A massive Kryn warship roared from orbit, on pillars of blue-white fire, hull bristling with cannon turrets. Hatches opened and plasma cannons emerged, glowing as they drank in power. Even the dire wolves couldn't survive that pounding. Scott spun to Chief, locking eyes with his friend. "Get the pack out of here, boy. Get them safe." Chief whined, glowing eyes pleading, but Scott shook his head. "Go now!" With an agonized howl, Chief bounded away, the wolf pack streaking after him into the rubble-strewn streets. Scott turned back to the warship, rifle snapping to his shoulder. The cannons pulsed, then stabbed searing light. Scott charged, zigzagging between energy blasts that blew craters in the rockcrete. His rifle chattered, pumping slugs into the warship's shields. The shields crackled and flared, but held. Scott kept firing, even as the cannons swiveled towards him, even as he knew it was hopeless. He pictured Wren herding Eliani refugees onto ships, pictured Chief leading the wolves to safety, pictured all the worlds that would burn under Kryn tyranny if he failed. He wouldn't win this fight. Didn't need to. He just had to buy time. Time for the pack to escape. Time for Wren to evacuate. Time for the galaxy to rise up. The cannons hummed as they hit full charge. Scott raised his rifle in one last defiant burst. Then he closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. He'd done his part. White fire erupted from the warship. The world flashed to blinding brilliance, then faded. Where Scott Murray once stood, only a glassy crater remained. The dire wolves' mournful howls carried on the wind. Eliani refugees whispered his name like a prayer. And a story spread from world to world of the human who fought for the hunted, the human who stood alone against nightmares, the human who died like a hero. In the chaos of the dire wolves' attack, the Eliani ships slipped away from the ravaged planet, vanishing into the star-flecked void. Aboard the lead vessel, Wren slumped in the command chair, his feathered head bowed under the weight of grief and exhaustion. Scott's sacrifice had bought them precious time, but at a terrible cost. As the years passed and Wren rose to leadership among the scattered Eliani, he made sure that Scott's tale was woven into the fabric of their history. Every child learned of the human who had stood against the Kryn, who had summoned the fury of Earth's ancient warbeasts to defend a people not his own. They whispered his name in reverence, a prayer for courage in the face of overwhelming odds. But while the Eliani clung to Scott's legend, the galaxy spun on, heedless of heroes or sacrifices. The Kryn's conquest continued, their shadow falling across world after world, and without Scott's guiding presence, the dire wolves, once noble allies, slowly succumbed to their feral instincts. They roamed the stars as mercenaries and raiders, their fearsome reputation growing with every bloody raid. The dream of human-beast unity faded. replaced by the harsh realities of survival in a merciless universe. Cycles turned, and Wren grew old, his feathers greying and his steps slowing. But he never forgot the human who had saved his people. So when rumors reached him of a particularly vicious pack of dire wolves ravaging a Kryn colony, he knew he had to investigate. Some faint hope still flickered in his heart that a remnant of Scott's legacy might have endured. The colony, when Wren's ship arrived, was a charnel house. Kryn corpses littered the blood-soaked ground, their armor rent by massive claws. Buildings lay in ruins, some still smouldering from the ferocity of the attack, and there, in the midst of the devastation, stood a lone, dire wolf, larger and more battle-scarred than any Wren had ever seen. Cybernetic implants glinted in its skull, achingly familiar. Wren approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. "Chief," he called softly, the name a half-remembered prayer. The wolf's head swung toward him, lips peeling back from gore-flecked fangs. But there was no recognition in those red eyes, no trace of the bond that had once united beast and human. Wren stretched out a trembling hand, desperate to rekindle some spark of the partnership that had saved his people. Chief lunged, massive jaws snapping shut a hair's breadth from Wren's fingers. The Eliani recoiled, heart pounding as the wolf snarled. The message was brutally clear. The time of alliance was over. The dire wolves answered to no one now, bound only by the law of fang and claw. As Chief turned to lope away, Wren caught a glint of metal around the wolf's thick neck. Dog tags, pitted and scarred by the ravages of time and war. Scott's tags. A lump formed in Wren's throat as the wolf vanished into the wreckage, taking that last piece of Scott with him. Wren stood amidst the carnage, a profound sense of loss settling over him like a shroud. Scott had given everything to buy the Eliani a future, but even that noble sacrifice couldn't change the basic nature of the galaxy. In the end, the strong would always prey on the weak. Alliances would wither and die, and the brightest legacies could be tarnished by the relentless march of time. Raising his eyes to the uncaring stars, Wren couldn't suppress the question that haunted him. In a universe so cold and cruel, was there room for heroes anymore? Or were they all just monsters in the end, scrabbling for survival in an indifferent cosmos? With a heavy heart, Wren turned his back on the ruins and the bitter memories they held. He walked slowly to his waiting ship, the echoes of distant battles and the ghosts of fallen friends, his only companions on the long journey home. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.